On Tragedy, we cover cases that involve real people and real events. Episodes may include discussions of violence, criminal behavior, and loss. We share these stories to honor those impacted and to raise awareness, but they may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. On December 10th, 1997, life would instantly change forever for so many people. A beautiful young woman would walk outside a bowling alley by herself, never to be seen alive again. The days following would test the faith of those close to her. Prayers were flowing nonstop, both in private and in public. Those who knew her, and even those who didn't, were asking God to bring her home. As the days passed, those prayers went unanswered. Until, unfortunately, the answers to their prayers were not what they expected. Alana Laney Gwinner did finally come home, both to Westchester, Ohio, and to her Maker. At least they knew where she was. She wasn't freezing in the cold weather of Ohio in January. She wasn't being held against her will. She wasn't being tortured or abused. But she was no longer alive. The prayers to find Laney had been answered, but the prayers to find her well and in good health were not. The questions toward God were many. You've been listening to the words from author Randy Hubbard's book that explores the unsolved murder of 23-year-old Alana Laney Gwinner and the ripple effect it had on a small community. The book also chronicles Randy's journey as a high school teacher and his students as they explored Laney's cold case, sparking a classroom movement that brought forensic science to life. We had the unique opportunity to speak with Randy about his book, his impact in the classroom, and about the case itself. This is Tragedy, a true crime podcast. Today we are chatting with Randy Hubbard. Randy is the author of The Laney Gwinner Effect, How One Cold Case Mobilized a High School to Make a Difference. And welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you guys doing this for me.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say, and Michael's here too. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So before we get into your book, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so I was a teacher for 34 years. I taught science, and eventually I got into teaching forensic science. And then from there, I started working on Laney's case. And after probably a year, not even that long, about 6 months, the student and I that were working on it, I said, hey, do you think this would be a good class? And he said it'd be great. And then I started the cold case MHS class that we did for the last 6 years.
You know, and we have several listeners who are teachers because, well, I was a teacher for 30 plus years and a high school administrator. And so when we talked earlier with you, I, of course, got really, really excited about the course creation. And we just talked about the authenticity of what you're doing in real world, right? I mean, really, really relevant to kids. So we have a lot of educators listening. So I think they're going to be really excited to hear about your background in education and how that turned into a book and made these experiences for students, and obviously talking about Laney as well.
Yeah, I feel like one of the big things that all educators should do is take a chance, try to be creative and do something different.
This is definitely different. So that's why when I got your email, I was, I think he commented on how quickly I responded back because I read that and I'm like, whoa, I've never heard of this. And this is unique and something I want to know a lot more about.
Yeah, I think we're doing a good job in education, really not focusing so much on the SATs and the ACTs, but really how can we teach skills to kids that will transfer into what happens to them after they leave high school, right? And this is a really great way to do that. And of course, taps into my personal expertise and things that I'm really, really passionate about. So it's nice to see these two things come together for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what led you to authoring the book? Talk some more about that.
So as Evan and I, which we'll probably talk about later, a student and I, we were getting into researching Laney's case and getting excited about it. And we were starting to learn so many things I would have never learned, even as a teacher. We were talking to people about how the river works and how the speed of the river and things travel on top of water and how they would travel on the bottom of the water and all kinds of new stuff. And I just thought, wow, what a great way for students to interact, to actually get to learn something different. And for me, it was such a learning experience. I mean, I think I taught for 34 years, and my last 6 were probably my most productive because I was learning the whole time. So as we're getting into the story, I also started feeling myself kind of evaluating my life a little bit. Not in a bad way, but actually in a good way, because it was starting to open me up to looking back at my faith and things like that. And I told my wife one day, I said, I really want to write a book. And she kind of looked at me and said, sure, go ahead. Probably thinking I wasn't really going to do it. So one day I went out on the patio and just started typing. And from that point on, I wanted to get Laney's story out, and I wanted to get it out in a way that people would see her effect on me, my students, on our community, even though she's not here, even though her case was almost 30 years ago now, she still had an effect. And I thought that was a story that needed to be told.
One thing, I mean, I've read most of the book at this point. So why this story? Why was this the one you gravitated toward?
Because I grew up in the town that she disappeared from. We found her case actually looking at other ones, and her case was at the bottom of a list of girls who had disappeared or had been killed, and their cases were still open. And the first one we looked at was actually out in Arkansas, but at the bottom of the page, it showed a connection between the Melissa Witt out in Arkansas and Laney Gwinner here in Fairfield, Ohio. They both disappeared from a bowling alley. They both disappeared in December. They both were alone in the parking lot. And then they were both found nearly 50, 60 miles away from where they were taken. So there were some connections there. And when I looked at it, I thought, I used to go to the bowling alley she disappeared from when I was a kid. My parents would take me there. And I just thought, I didn't even know this story happened in my hometown. And I was from that area. So it was just kind of, I thought that I've never had any interest in the stuff that happened in my hometown like that. And it just really gravitated towards it.
I was thinking about how you must have felt whenever you're talking about this vehicle that's overturned. It's in the water. You can see the tires coming out of the surface of the water. And then you went into the water, basically feeling around, trying to figure out what kind of car this was. Talk to us about that experience.
Yeah, that was kind of crazy. To get the tip, another teacher had actually called me from Mason County High School, which is actually in Kentucky, and they're probably about 2 hours from us. I got a call from him, and he said, "Hey, I think this guy's looking for you," and I'm not sure what he's talking about. He said a guy called me and said there is a car in the river behind his uncle's house that's near Fairfield, Ohio. And he's been telling people for 20 years it's been there and nobody will listen to it. So I said, okay, give me his number. So called him and he said, hey, won't you go meet me out at my uncle's house? Of course, we're new at this and listening to all the other podcasts, where they go and knock on doors and do all that. I thought, wow, this is a chance for us to do that. Probably wasn't necessarily the smartest thing to do at the time. We really didn't know what we were getting into. But we were so excited, and we thought if we could just find the car, this would turn the whole case around. So we go out there, and a guy by the name of Glenn lives there. And his nephew told us that Glenn's kind of, he's a little bit on edge. He's an old Vietnam veteran. He's, had some health issues and things like that. He doesn't like people being on his land, but he knows you're coming, but he might give you a hard time at first. I said, okay, so no big deal. So we pull in to this house, and I don't know if you saw the pictures in the book, but the old dilapidated barns, there's stuff all over the yard. It looks like nobody actually lives there. And all of a sudden, a black truck comes screaming in behind us. Gravel flying all over the place and things. I'm thinking, oh my God, what are we doing? And all of a sudden, a couple seconds later, the nephew gets out of the car. You could tell that he rushed over there from work and things like that. And he introduced himself. Well, then we turned around and Glenn, the older gentleman, is walking up a gravel road. He's got no shirt on. He's barefoot. And he's walking right down the middle of this gravel. I'm thinking my feet would be killing me by that time. And he comes up, he's got long hair, kind of a scruffy guy. And he started telling us the story that he's been telling the police for years that this car has been in the river, but nobody will come and see it. Part of that is that Glenn is known to kind of wander around town and collect things like aluminum and all that kind of stuff for money and things like that. So,
right.
To them, he wasn't really somebody they would believe a whole lot. But to us, I thought, why not? Maybe it is something. So we get out there. The first time we go, we're starting to walk down the gravel road. And all of a sudden, the nephew says, hold on a minute. He goes back to his truck. Well, he comes back out with a shotgun. And I'm thinking, oh, my God, what are we getting into?
It's about to get real.
Yes. I'm thinking to myself.
Turn your phone locator on.
Exactly. So I look at Evan, and I look at him, and I kind of said, if I tell you to run, just take off.
No.
So we get there, and he goes, oh, sorry. He goes, sorry, didn't mean to scare you. He goes, well, we got a aggressive groundhog out here. So now I'm thinking, well, not only do we have a guy with a shotgun, we got an aggressive groundhog. So I'm thinking, what am I doing?
When I read that section, I'm like, what is an aggressive groundhog?
This must be really a big, I think about, they're small. Isn't this like a prairie dog?
Well, this whole section of the story I found fascinating and, funny and interesting. That's why I wanted to talk about it.
Is it different? Are prairie dogs and groundhogs different?
They're from the same family, but groundhogs are a lot bigger.
Right, so this is your science background kicking in, right? You're going to do some kind of animal taxonomy TED Talk, I think, right?
Exactly. A little bit bigger, a little more aggressive. They protect their nest and stuff for a little bit more. So, and I was a little worried about that. I wasn't worried about the guy with the gun anymore. I'm thinking I'm going to get bit by a groundhog. So,
oh my gosh! Wow.
So it was kind of crazy, but we get out there. And they're showing us where the car is. And the first time we went, we couldn't see it. The river was a little too high. It was rushing a little bit too much. So he said, I'll call you when the water goes down. Well, about probably 2 months later in July, the water goes down. He calls us. So Evan and I prepared. It was a steep grade down this hill with giant pieces of concrete and stuff that they had thrown over the edge. So Evan and I tied ourselves to a tree with a big rope. We're rappelling down the back of this hill. We get out into the water, and I took like a telescoping paint stick, and I would put it in the areas of the river because he said there are some deep spots. Well, I'm thinking that's all I need to do is lose a student in the middle of the river. So, so we go out there and we poke around. We finally find it. So we get out there, and it was exciting because one, we found the car, and then as we're measuring it. We found the front of the car. We found the back of the car. We took a tape measure with us, so we measured the length of it and the width of it. And we're actually yelling up to Glenn and his nephew because they have their phone and said, hey, can you look up the size of a Honda Del Sol from 1993? So every time we would yell out a measurement, he would say, yeah, that's perfect. And then we'd yell out the length. Yeah, that's perfect. The distance between the tires, and we're thinking, oh man, maybe we found it. And then we start digging around. We found the door handle, found a couple other things of car parts, and then we felt the tires. And once we felt the tires, we were kind of sure that it wasn't her car, because her car had 5 lug nuts and there was only 4 on there. So we kind of knew it wasn't her car, but we weren't sure. And we had already called the police and told them we were doing that. Well, we marked it. Evan's a very smart kid. He brought a painted red milk jug and tied it to a string and tied it onto the car so that if the river comes up, you can still see it.
Mm-hmm.
So we left it there. Probably 3 months later, I get a call from his nephew that says, hey, are you at my uncle's house? I said, no, why? And he said, well, the police are there pulling out that car. I said, you got to be kidding me.
Mm.
So I broke every traffic law in the state to get there, driving from my house to get back there. When I got there, they had already pulled it out and said that they identified the car. It was actually one that had been reported stolen, but it wasn't her car. So, which was unfortunate. But it's an exciting trip, I will say that.
Yeah, so all the teachers want to know, what did the field trip permission slip look like?
Well, that one wasn't quite legal, probably.
I can tell you that's the first thing all the teachers are like, somebody signed a field trip permission slip for that?
Well, I did talk to his parents several times. I said, hey,
I'm sure you did.
Yeah, we're going to go do this. And they thought, oh, great, we'll go with you. So, but they didn't go. So they were excited about it too. So.
One thing I wanted to find out too is, I'm trying to be careful not to say too much because I want people to read the book. Right. And, but are there other areas in the book, there are other highlights that you'd like to talk to us about?
Well, the biggest thing I think about the book is, her story is tragic. You can read about all the things that happened that night and prior and all that. But I think the biggest thing for me was how her brother and her friends and everybody talked about her. Laney was somebody that was the life of the party. She was somebody that they all just couldn't get enough of. But she's like everybody else. She had some issues in her life. All 23-year-olds are kind of doing crazy things at that time. And she was looking for love in all the wrong places. So, and a lot of times she found herself in bad situations. But she was kind of turning that around, and she finally found somebody that was probably going to be good for her. She had just finished school. She was out celebrating that, and then she ran into the wrong person. But the biggest thing for me was her brother, David, who is a tremendous man. He said when she died, he lost 3 family members that day because his mom and dad ended up dying after that because of a broken heart, basically.
Right.
Dad became an alcoholic and mom had already had some issues, but he said that she just died of a broken heart. So that was the biggest thing. The other thing is that it just affected me and my students so much that we thought we had to do more. And we thought there are so many cases out there that if we start a class, maybe we can at least get the stories back out and hopefully somebody will come up with some answers for those stories.
All right. And so that kind of gets into the second half of this that I want to talk about is the class, how it got started and where is it today? So
it was kind of crazy. We're working on it and on Laney's case. And I just looked at Evan and said, hey, what do you think about this being a class? He said, this would be great because we were learning so much. I said, okay, well, you and I got to sit down and write it. So actually a student and I wrote it together. So he was with me the whole time. We wrote it in about a week and a half because we had to hurry up and get it in before the deadline. And as you being an administrator, Leslie, the first thing they asked me is, how are you going to keep the kids safe? So we had to come up with all the strategies of how we're going to do that. But I also got some help from Cheryl McCullum. I don't know if you guys know her, but she is from Atlanta. She's been on Nancy Gray's show. She gets questioned a lot of times on TV shows about crime scenes and things like that. She's pretty famous for the work she does. And she has several podcasts herself. But she has a program for college students. And I talked to her about how we do that. She actually called my assistant principal and told her, they can do this and they can do it safely, and kind of gave her, the idea of, if you do it the right way, you can get those stories back out. And she accepted it and we got it through. So we started the next year with, I think, 12 cases. Students did a tremendous job. We were going to do a presentation at the end of the year, but then COVID hit. So we didn't get to do it that year. So, but the next year we did it live in front of parents and things like that. Then the next year we started doing it live and live streaming it also. So, and we've had several cases that have been kind of reopened, at least relooked at, because police officers saw what we were doing. and we had a couple witnesses that they didn't have, or we had witnesses that changed their story and things like that. So, so that's how we kind of got into it. We're getting now to the point where, the police departments were starting to work with us. Now, I stepped away last year. I retired, but I turned it over to a guy that had been teaching forensic science with me for a while. And right now I think they're doing 11 cases right now. And he says it's going tremendous. They had all day today. He said that they had 12 or 13 people calling back to talk about the cases. So,
Wow.
Well, and I think what's interesting for me as I listen to that story is you're not just teaching skills like interviewing skills and critical thinking. You're teaching empathy and compassion.
Exactly. And that was the one thing I wanted them to get out of that.
Mm-hmm. And that is a skill that I think sometimes in school, we either forget to, or we feel like we don't have time for it. And it's so, so important, even more important, I think, than critical thinking. So good on you for moving forward with that. And I think you talked about taking a risk, which that's amazing. I want to take this class.
It's a lot. Yeah, it is. It's a lot of fun. It's something that it becomes addicting. Like right now, I'm still working on 2 or 3 cases that we worked on over the 6 years. I'm currently talking to a prisoner in Texas who says he has information on a case that we worked on, I think 4 years ago, that it actually got into Time Magazine and some other things. But he says he has information on it. So I'm kind of feeling him out to see if he really does.
So it sounds to me like you retired about as effectively as my wife.
As I did.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yes.
It really is. It's a different method of doing the same thing that we are doing. We are relooking at cases. We are speaking to people who we spoke to a family member of someone who has been missing since 1979 out of West Palm Beach. And I believe it's the first time that family member ever spoke publicly.
That's right.
Wow.
And that was on our podcast. And, so you just told a story about how you're speaking with someone and getting new witnesses and uncovering new information. And we're doing the same thing, just using a different medium to make that happen.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing that the students finally got, because I told them, this is not a research project. This is a life project. Because once you hear family members or friends talk about their loved ones, mm-hmm. it changes your whole thought about what you're doing.
No, I couldn't agree more on that. Even when Elise and I first started this podcast, it started out with, she just had a love for true crime. And I mentioned to her one day that you do realize there's an unsolved murder in my family. So we started out with that case. So I was thinking we would be able to interview people that may not have felt comfortable interviewing, things like that. And then something strange happened, at least strange for me, is I thought this was going to be a handful of episodes. We would help out the family. We'd go to the vigil, and that would be the end of it. But then people started to reach out to us, and then another, mm-hmm. and then another after that. Mm-hmm. And now we have 4 cases going on at the same time. And we've made so many connections with these families that now I feel like I want to help them. And I need to help them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. I still have a bunch of them in my phone. They're friends of mine now. So,
right.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly how it happens.
Mm-hmm. I did want to ask something. In our cases that we have covered up to this point, our missing persons cases, those folks are still missing. Laney's situation is different. So tell us about Laney and how she was discovered.
Yeah, so on December 10th, around 12:30 in 1997, she walked out of the bowling alley, never to be seen alive again. Unfortunately, she was missing for 31 days. She was found floating in the Ohio River on January 11th, 1998. And what was weird about that is that she was found floating in the middle of the river in the middle of January. So if anybody knows, the Midwest, December and January are pretty cold in this area, and the water gets really cold in the river. And she was bloated enough that she was floating on top of the water. Well, that's kind of unusual, because if she was actually at the bottom of the river in the car, like the theory says, she probably would have stayed at the bottom of the river. and she would have stayed there until probably May when the water started to warm back up. But yet she was floating in the middle, which the week before it rained really hard and the temperatures actually got up into the 60s outside of the river. So for her to be floating in the river, she had to start to decompose. And the only way she was going to do that was to be out of the river on the bank somewhere. So she was found floating in the middle of the river about 50 miles away from Fairfield. She was easily spotted, which is even more rare, by the helicopter pilots that were flying over the top of the river. They weren't actually looking for her. They were looking for an officer from Covington, Kentucky, which is just on the other side of Cincinnati. They were looking for Officer Michael Parton, who had fallen into the river trying to help a Cincinnati police officer stop a drunk driver who had jumped from the road side of the bridge to the walkway side of the bridge, and Officer Parton missed and fell through. They were actually looking for him, and they knew they probably weren't going to find him, but, police officers and military, they don't ever leave a brother behind. And they just happened to find her and found her floating on top, and he could actually tell it was a female body and what she was wearing and everything else from the helicopter.
And were there any clues that may have, I'm trying to think about how to say this with compassion. Was there anything that was learned that may have indicated what happened to her?
The autopsy report, when they did it at first, there wasn't any visual signs except for a possible bruise under her right eye, but they couldn't really tell if it was or not. And then the only other thing is that they said she was asphyxiated and she was dead before she entered into the water. So at first, the coroner wasn't sure if he was going to call it a homicide. He had it actually undetermined at first. And then eventually, after he looked at a few more things, he said most likely she was killed before she entered the water.
But her car has yet to be found.
Yes, it's still out there somewhere. The theory is that they pushed her in the car into the river somewhere, and she got pushed out. It was a 1993 Honda Del Sol had a top on it that would come off, like the old T-tops of a Trans Am, but the whole top would come off. Well, they thought that she was pushed into the water rose, a tree or something hit it, knocked the top off, and she came floating out. The only problem with that is, like I said, after talking to people who have worked on the river and have from Boone County Water Rescue who pull bodies out of the water, they said by looking at her and her clothes and stuff and the fact that she was floating on top of the water, she wouldn't have done that in January. She would have rolled on the bottom, would have probably got stuck down there. When she did come up, it wouldn't have been till May. Yeah, they call them May pops. So,
yeah, when I was reading through that part, I was like, so they believe that she was on the bank somewhere.
The helicopter pilot, Covington fire chief who was in the helicopter, and this guy that I talked to who actually saw pictures of Laney, in her autopsy report, things like that, and he's worked on the river for a really long time, said he's pretty sure she was not in the river during that time. That she just didn't appear to be on the bottom of the river at all.
Oh, wow. Anyway, back to the class. Any students that have gone through your class, have they gone into law enforcement or any kind of investigation?
That's funny you asked that. I have one who is now in the law enforcement in a town just near us in Sharonville. She actually went for forensic science, and then when she got out, she decided to go to the police academy. So she's doing a tremendous job there. I have another one who just called me not too long ago and said that she went on a ride along. She loved everything about it. So she's actually going to the academy as soon as she graduates from college. I have probably right now, I think there are 6 or 7 that are in either forensic science, forensic biology, forensic chemistry, or in crime scene investigation right now that are all in college. So we're getting a lot of kids that are going off to do those kind of things.
Sounds like a success to me.
I agree.
Oh yeah, it's been a lot. It's been fun to watch them go through this. So,
All right. So where do people find your book?
it is on geniusbookpublishing.com, or they can get it on Amazon as well.
All right. Excellent.
And what if people would like to learn more about Laney?
You can contact me at hubbardra24@gmail.com. Or if you go online, you can see a lot of the stories that they have done on our class and on what what Evan and I have done on Laney's case. There's all kinds of news articles out there. So if you have newspapers.com, you can go back and type in her name in the year 1997, and you'll find all kinds of articles about her and her story.
Very nice. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we close out today?
No, if you go read the book, it's not your normal true crime book. It's not one that's going to give you the gory details and things like that. It's more about a journey of working through the case, how it affected myself, my students, and how we have done something where we're trying to reach out and help others. We have so many cases, not just in Ohio, but all over the United States. I think the number is like 250,000 unsolved cases, and it might even be more than that now. So if you get a chance, read it, see how it's affected us, but also go out and look at the stories that are in the back of the book, because those cases are still open as well, and any information about those would be tremendous.
Excellent. Well, cool. I really appreciate you taking your time, today with us, and this has been a great interview.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys doing this. It's been kind of a work of passion, so I can't get away from it.
You can tell.
That's what educators do.
Exactly.
That's what we do.
Exactly.
Thank you for listening to this unique episode of Tragedy, a true crime podcast. If you have any information regarding the unsolved homicide of Alana Laney Gwinner, please contact the Fairfield Police or the Butler County Sheriff's Office. You can also use our tip line at 850-296-8690. You've been listening to Tragedy, a true crime podcast. Our purpose is to honor victims by sharing their stories through the voices of friends, family, and those whose lives were forever changed. If today's episode resonated with you, we encourage you to subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast so these important stories continue to be heard. Together, we can preserve their memories and ensure their voices are never forgotten. If you have ideas for cases we should cover or questions about what you heard, you can connect with us through our Facebook group, Tragedy, a True Crime Podcast, on X at Tragedy Podcast, by email at tragedyaTrueCrimePodcast@gmail.com, or by visiting our website, www.tragedyaTrueCrimePodcast.com. Thank you for listening, and we hope you'll join us next time.